Oh, we didn't quite time it just right, but close. Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, ladies and gents, to another edition of Office Hours. I'm Prof B, Professor Ben, or maybe. We'll figure that out, I suppose, along the way. Who am I? Who are any of us, really? I'm joined by my co-host, Professor Sean McLean, also of ServiceNow fame. And this week, we're going to take you guys into some of the stuff you wish you knew, hoped you knew, and maybe answer some questions along the way. And this week, we're changing things up a little bit. We're starting right off with all the good stuff, and we're getting into what we like to call back to first principles. This is the story behind the story, or in this case, for this week, what I like to call the hidden chapter in the ServiceNow Fundamentals class. This is the chapter between 2 and Module 3, where we understand what we like to call McLean's first law. And in order to make McLean's first law actually really happen, we're going to bring the man himself in, Mr. Sean McLean. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Cool to be here and be getting to share these with you again, as always.
So last week, I was going to say, last week we talked about being the admin, right? Like the super in the building, right? We've got this shared piece of infrastructure, this ServiceNow platform environment that's sort of like a building, and as an admin, you might be the superintendent, and you might have a mandate to come in and support it. And in order to support it, you got to know how the plumbing works, and that's where you come in, right? This is where we get into the stuff behind the lines. So
yeah, just picture me as that guy with the plunger and the really, really low slung tool belt.
No other things that we want to. Yeah, let's
we'll leave it right there.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
I'm glad to get the opportunity. So one of the things that we talk about, and I love that Ben kind of brought this idea, because when you think through the ServiceNow fundamentals modules, there's the, let me navigate. But then they talk about task management, and between task management and database management, these are things that admins and developers need to be familiar with. So when we talk about that line, right, between the admin and the developer, or that role of doing that work, understanding architecture is key. And so Ben and I both had some ideas and some things that I think we'll be talking throughout the next upcoming several weeks as we go through our summer of discussing this stuff. But I wanted to talk about a fundamental concept to me, or something that kind of made the lights go off in my brain. And in particular, that was a thing called people do stuff to things. So I did a video about this, like, I don't know, forever ago. So it's kind of hokey and cheesy, but I'll throw it out here. I've had people tell me in the past, geez, it would be great if you would update this. It's kind of on my list.
It's on the list. One might call it a task, right? And I think we're going to do that this summer in our summer of ServiceNow.
Right. And I think I'm going to give it a whirl. I think I can throw it out that way. We'll see if it goes up. It's on the ServiceNow community. Hey, look at that. It comes out as if you posted it. So that works. I'll take it. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my system. I'm going to try to do that. So give me a minute while I do that. We'll see. Screen sharing. So you'll have to bear with me. Yeah, who knows how this will work, because I have two screens, and I hope that it lets me pick which screen. There we go.
I was going to say we could do it. We are broadcast, well, at least presentation professionals, right?
Right. Well, you are. I'm just kind of following along. I'm here for color commentary usually. So there we go. Hopefully what you'll see on my screen is what looks like an instance of ServiceNow, and it's my personal instance of ServiceNow. So I'm going to kind of start us out here.
I don't see your screen yet, so let's put it into, like, if you've got your share.
Oh, no.
Yeah, let me get you into the full share here.
All right, let's share.
Oh,
no luck.
We were just kidding, folks. Sean is about to share. Maybe he'll share.
All right, let's see if we get this. Thanks for double checking me. There's my share screen. There's 2. There's the entire screen. Lost permission. All righty. Now I got to go back and do system preferences. So I'm not going to have a lot of luck running this.
Uh-oh.
So then in that case, what I'm going to do is switch on the fly, showing that flexibility that we always kind of roll with, right?
That's right.
Which is because you're going to be demoing pretty soon anyway. So I'm going to ask you to share screen.
Okay, I can do that.
And actually, hang on one sec. Let's see if I can do this. Nope.
We making it work. We making it work.
Yeah,
How
I'm
about
going to have you share.
All right. I could do that. I can accommodate. And I don't know, do you want to guide me? You guide me, sir. You guide me.
Perfect. Well, in that case, then what I'm going to have you do is load through on your screen. And when we talk through this context, to me, when thinking about administrating ServiceNow, one of the simplest and core things to remember, it's really only about three tables, right? People, which is the user table, doing stuff, which is our task table, to things, which is our CMDB table. So as we go through this, I'm going to ask Ben to open up the user table for us, and we'll take just a moment.
Hey, we made it. Look at that.
All right, I love it. So when we look at those user tables, those are our people. They're the people that log into the system. Not only they're the people that administrate the system. They're the people that develop the system. They're the people that use the system every day. So those are all the people that we have in our user table or our SIS user table. So there's your people. It's easy enough. One of the things I'll mention as we dive deeper into this is Ben talks about security and access, and we spend other sessions talking about access controls and some of those people, is that those user records are associated with group tables. And by associating them with a group, that group can inherit rights from their roles. So a user becomes a member of a group. That group is associated with certain roles. So that gives them the power to do different things in ServiceNow. So it's all about the people. So once we have a user, who do you have up there? Oh, Jimothy, right. So Jimothy is a member of a group, and if he were a member of any group, he would inherit a number of roles. So we'll grab the edit button. Grab maybe database, for instance. And I think, yeah. And when we make Jimothy a member of the database, one of the things you'll notice is, in addition to loads and messages, if you look down below, the user Jimothy now has roles. Those roles are associated with what Jimothy can do. So there's our people. And the people administration is about combining the users to the groups with the roles. Now let's talk about the doing stuff. Regardless of whether you're an ITSM person or a human resources person or a financials person or a none of those things I've mentioned person. Most of what ServiceNow is, if we think about it, is a system of getting work done. And since that's the case, you're doing stuff. All of the people in an enterprise are doing different types of work. Those work pieces are stored in the task. So I'm going to kind of double up with a little trick here. And this is one that most of us show in these fundamentals classes. But probably one that you might not pick up if you're just going through the step-by-steps in the labs at your own pace. If you want to see a core table, if you know the underlying database name for the
Ooh, hey,
table, you can
what do you
find out.
mean by that, by the way? Like we talked a little, we hinted about core tables yesterday, but I was also going to mention a couple things like while we're talking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about core tables, we talk about tables that are extended or tables that are at the fundamental architecture of ServiceNow that everything's built on. So for example, when we think about people doing stuff to things, the user table is the table where everybody logs in. It's kind of fundamental. It's system driven. You can't do anything unless you're a record in the user table so that you can log in. So then the other table is the task table. I want to figure out what you wanted to add, and then I want to hit us up with that cool task navigation trick.
Well, so I added a couple things, and we're going to do some callbacks later. But you might have noticed that Jimothy the cat got like a little meow here.
I
Um,
love that.
yeah, when we added him to when we updated him here, we'll call back to that a little bit later. But maybe in a future episode, we'll talk about what did that there. I also wanted to point out that Jimothy, when he got into the database group here, he also got some roles, right? He also ended up here, and this is something that we added on a little bit later, because we can talk about all the kind of like little ways that you can trick out your environment. Oh gosh, like we were talking about people doing stuff. When we added him to database, we also defined a couple of other rule sets that said, ooh, not only does he have the roles to do stuff, he here's all the skills that you would have when you were in this group as well. Another little optional fun thing here to think about, but it's all just relationships between all of these different notions, all these different ideas, some of which are out of the box and some of which are not. But I think an important thing to remember is that this is all just, well, records and tables, right? And we're just trying to define how they're related to each other. So I just wanted to throw that out there as you're kind of talking about this people do stuff to things component. And we can have all kinds of dimensions, meaning like different little attributes of those people that live in different tables that are
Yeah.
all related to our people here.
Yeah, and I think this is great because this lets and this is part of the reason, and I think I'm glad Ben invited me, is being able to have both of us there. You'll get context and color from both of us in pieces that I would just gloss over or miss that Ben's bringing up, and it's really important to get that understanding these three core pieces: people, which is the user table, which has, just as Ben's saying, lots of stuff built off it. So their rights and roles, but also potentially other modules that we can track things like their skills or their functionality or abilities to do other things. There's reporting and time cards. All of those things are based off the fact that ServiceNow's core architecture functions on a system of users. So then we have those users, and now it's time to talk about the doing stuff. All of the stuff that we do, whether it's managing an incident in the world of ITSM, or handling a case in the world of case management, or maybe opening a project or project tasks, or any of those kinds of works are inherited from a core table. The second part of our little triangle here, the people doing stuff is the task table. Now, here's a cool navigation trick. If you happen to know the underlying, what we would call the SQL or SQL name of the table, so the database name of the table, in this case, it's lowercase task. You won't see a module for that. And we'll talk more about modules in an upcoming time. But if you were to type task.list, and if you type all caps list, it'll actually open that table in a whole new tab. So Ben types in task.list. And one of the things that you see, if we look at task.list, there's just countless numbers running down there, right?
Oh my
But if
gosh,
we,
so many.
yeah, thousands, actually, yeah, and you can look to the count to see, thousands of them, 15,000 just about. But if you scroll down through those tasks, what you'll find is they're all different kinds of tasks.
Oh,
So some start with tasks, some will start with change, some may start with incidents, some may start with. So all of those kinds of, ooh, dare I say it, my ITSM people are going to cringe at me.
oh, do it. We like a
Tickets.
oh,
I know I said it, tickets. All of those tickets that people track, all of that work that they do are based on the fundamental table task.
comes
So
fighting
people, right. So people, users table, do stuff, task table. And we'll get to the things in just a minute.
Can
But so,
I
yeah,
pop a little thing here that like I love to talk about this because task is one of those kind of core, we'll say, tables
yep.
that we talk about a lot. And there are lots of task types because we don't normally get to see the task table in all of its naked Rubenesque glory here. Um, but now we get to see it and we can kind of, because we're the admins and we are the most powerful beings in the instance at the moment. Um,
Phenomenal, awesome power.
that's right. Um,
Living space.
sometimes itty bitty decision making ability.
Right.
Um, I'm going to group by task type here, and it's just going to break everything down, and we can see all the different kinds of work. And you might say kinds of tickets, depending on your background. But I like to say that they're all just different kinds of work, and it's going to take it a minute to crank through here because we've got 15,000. We didn't even bother doing any kind of optimization on this query. We're seeing like closed tasks, and we're seeing incidents, we're seeing problems, we're seeing follow-on tasks, we're seeing certification tasks, we're seeing everything under the sun here. So it's going to take a second.
And
Um,
this is great to get though, because in that architecture, all of the work that you're administrating. So even if you're not the production system administrator, maybe you're administrating the ITSM piece, you manage the incidents, or you're the product owner for incident management, or product owner for change management, or you manage case management. You may have a subset of that. But it's nice to know that under all of that work that you're doing, there's a core fundamental table that's task. Now, one of the cool things about that task table, and this is useful for not just administrators when thinking about, well, what am I managing? but also for developers who are thinking about maybe I want to build some kind of other stuff that people do, some other kind of work.
Well,
Hooked
did I
on.
break it? I might have broken
Oh,
it.
that's all right.
I might have broken my little demo environment here.
I'm not going to tell. If
All
I
right.
don't tell and you won't
I
tell, we'll
was
be
gonna
like
call it
nothing
out,
happened.
but I was starting to get a little uncomfortable there, and I was like, oh.
Well,
But it's okay. Well, you're still vamping, so keep vamping.
while the tables are kind of turning, no pun intended, and we're looking at those task tables kind of getting ready to kind of build out. There we go. So all of those different.
I'm gonna do a thing here that will save us like quite a bit of pain.
Okay.
Active is true.
There we go. We'll cut
That
our
will,
tables or
oh my
records.
gosh, that killed 6,000 records. And then let's do a little. That's a little bit better. So let's do that. Now we'll group by task type.
Okay. So as we look at all those different kinds of tickets, all the different work that people can do, the tasks, a lot of ServiceNow's functionality is built off that core table of task. So things like a service level agreement, which measures the time it takes to assign work or do work or move work from one state to another, regardless of what that kind of work is. If it's an incident, maybe we're talking about assigning it to the assignment group and the right assignment person and doing that stuff. A service level agreement is this whole other set of tables that sits on task and checks those other fields. So if the work that you do extends from that core table task, incident is extended from task, problem is extended from task, case is extended from task, project is extended from task.
I was going to say, like, do you want me to, I'm going to zoom in here. We're going
Yeah,
to zoom and enhance, like, check out some of these types here. And you might wonder,
yeah.
oh my gosh, that's a time. Follow on certification change request, a demand. So when my kids demand something, that's work for me. Oh, I mean, like when somebody in my environment. Oh, so we've got demand and we've got demand task. Oh, that seems interesting. SLA. Oh, okay, interesting. An idea. An idea is a piece of work. How about that? Incident, issue, budget, program, project, problem, action, request of a change, a story, activity, control, engagement, interview, walkthrough, policy exception, case, evidence request, issue. Like, holy cow, right? Crisis task, HR
Oh,
task,
that's a new one for me. That's awesome.
risk
HR
acceptance.
tasks,
Yeah.
risk tasks.
Risk avoidance, risk mitigation, risk transfer. I'm like, you've got spam, spam, spam and eggs, spam, 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 beans and spam, right?
Right? Green eggs and spam.
Penetration test assessment requests. That sounds sexy. Vendor risk issue, upgrade history task, private task. Ooh, now we're talking.
Right? You went from sexy to private task, and I went, "Ooh, do we
This
need
is
to
why
preview?"
we're gonna get the E this week.
There you go. This is going to
So,
get tricky.
all right.
So we understand people are records in the user table.
So I
The
could have
stuff
an
they
idea. Timothy could have an idea,
Right. As
right?
long as it's work that we want to track and we want to track how efficiently they do it, that's the whole reason for managing work, right? We want to see if we can find areas to build efficiencies. We want to kind of track how well the work's getting done, see where else we can automate. All of those things get pinned off the work we do, and that work we do is tracked through the task table. If what you do, as you can see here, is something that you can either use one of the types of already built tasks, or you can extend one of the tasks that's out there to do a different kind of work that's similar, then from a developer standpoint, you've got kind of a leg up because you get to inherit approvals and service level agreements and all of the kinds of other function that you usually do to check and make sure your work's efficient. It's awesome that Everett brought up, and this is a great one. Everett Thompson is another
He's a good
great
resource.
instructor, and yeah,
Previous
yeah,
like work colleague here at the mothership. So I believe he's
yeah.
over at Cask now. But
Well, in bringing this up, and Everett brings up a really great point, straight from ServiceNow, and we're going to do this when we talk deeper architecture. You can see all the table architecture components made along with these users, tasks, and CIs, because there's a lot of other tables in the architecture that we also should understand, and we'll hope to get to that. I think in another one, but config kind of like table.list will show you all of the other tables that get touched before you hit task or user or location or any other table you want. Before your data actually streams down to that record, it has to hit a lot of other pieces. And just like there's table.list, there is also table.config and there's table.form. There's a couple other navigational tricks that we'll talk about, I think, and we'll keep in our show notes as well, because I think that's a nice add. So we got the people, we got the doing stuff, which is the task. Now we just need to talk about the things.
I was gonna say, what's that third leg look like? So if a
It,
task is not a thing, like what is a thing?
the things are the things are the the
The
things
thing.
that you touch and
Where
move and
okay.
do stuff to. So this becomes that thing, the CMDB or configuration management database. Always a tricky concept
I thought it was the cat management database, but
no. Yeah,
okay.
that's a whole different. Yeah, you can't really manage cats, can you? They're kind of like over
I think,
here
yeah,
and
you kinda have to herd them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when we get to the CMDB, then we're starting to talk about the um, the things that you'd be doing the stuff to. Now, in our world, in my world that I grew up in of IT service management, usually there was an IT service, and
When
that
Sean was a young warthog.
way back in the day, right? And yeah, whether we're talking in the ancient times of point of sale services, so you'd have a basically an electronic cash register that plugged into a server somewhere.
I thought you pulled
Um,
a little lever on it or something.
yeah. um, in those days and those things, those things, we would need to track the management and fixing and uptime and all of that stuff. So
Mm.
the CMDB or configuration management database is a list of all of those things that support the IT services or work that we do. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, a cat management database, I think, is this whole, and sometimes the CMDB seems like a little bit of cat management because keeping track of all of your things is pretty creepy.
Ooh, and we got a good shout out from Mr. Thompson about docs. So check those in the chat there.
That's
Because
perfect.
yeah, we added some more, and there was like a cool one called dot filter that I use a lot now to avoid things like me accidentally trying to query, the task table by itself without doing an active equals true first. So
Yeah. Now these things are actually useful to keep in mind. If you're watching the chat, we're going to put these together on show notes and kind of keep some of those key links out there. So Everett and Ben has a couple, and same thing with your questions. And as we put the answers, we usually put them back into the show notes so that there's a reference to them. Now we got our people, the users. We got our doing stuff, the tasks. We got the things, which is the CMDB. The CMDB is broken into services. When we think about services, there we come from a background, well, I come from a background of IT, so information technology. But when we think about it, almost any service we do now ties into some kind of information technology, and so there's some kind of IT behind it. So when we think about a CMDB, there's weeks and months of diving into CMDB and the CSDM or the Common Service Data Model. But the services component is the here's what we need to create value or manage value, and here are the components that we need to build, fix, maintain, move, manage. That's the things that we do stuff to. And as Ben's pulling up the idea of a business service, one of those business services we have in our demo data that's great to experiment with is bond trading. So if I think about bond
the
trading, if I were
classic,
what's that?
the Thinking Man's demo CI.
Right. Well, it's the standard we fall into it in most of the class demos and stuff. And if you look up bond trading, you'd find that it is made up of a bunch of IT components that might need to be managed, fixed, or maintained. So we have the service. I'm out doing bond trading. But if we look below that, the compilation of how those pieces to that service are connected, those might be things that we would be doing stuff to. We
Oh
might
my gosh.
move them, change them, patch them. Yeah,
Right.
and as you
All
can
the stuff
see,
that is used by the folks on Water Street and in central London, right? And that's all the things that they touch, right? All the
the
things
stuff
that they might do stuff with.
yeah, the stuff that the things that they don't even know they're using, but we know we have to maintain or administrate or keep running. So we've hit people, the user table, we've hit doing stuff, the task table, and we've hit things, which is the CMDB, which really underneath the core table there is called the CMDB table or configuration management data table. Now that's got a whole other architecture that's a blast to dive into. But at this level, we kind of just want to get those three things to think about architecturally.
Nice. That's a nice place to kinda
Yeah.
bring us back home, because like that in and of itself is such a big kind of aha moment. And when we teach classes around this, and we run workshops around this notion of the CMDB, or sometimes I like to sometimes even get people interested in this notion of common services,
Hmm.
which we'll link to later. And some of y'all might be familiar with something that is sometimes referred to as a service graph. I'm just going to give you guys like a, well, actually, I'll put those in the show notes a little bit later. But this notion that all of the stuff that all of the things that we do to the stuff in our environments, all the stuff can be tracked, and it's pretty dynamic. And sometimes it is a full-time job for somebody just to be keeping track of all of these things, right? So that the people can do stuff to them. I know that that
Yeah.
sounds, it's not, maybe that's not the most elegant explanation for that, but I
No, but
thought,
it makes so much sense. But it's also cool when we think about, one of the reasons we were doing this is for people who are coming in and going, where do I fit in the ServiceNow picture? Well, we've talked about the administrative role, but Ben's already hitting on the idea that there's a whole other set of roles in just managing the things in ServiceNow. Managing the CMDB or configuration management system is a whole system of jobs and opportunities and work and roles for people who are, I don't know, what would you say, Ben? Detail oriented and clever at getting all the stuff together.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I like to say very
So
particular, because I'm very particular about how I like my things, and so I want to track my things. Um, and you know what? If I'm working in the public sector, if I'm the government, if I'm working on really sensitive topics or sensitive ideas, I'm going to be extra particular about who touches my things. Don't touch my thing
right.
without permission, aka that's a change request, right? Like you have to go and ask somebody to go move the thing, or configure the thing, or change the thing, or make sure that thing hasn't changed while you weren't looking. And I had an we'll call it an unauthorized change when I got home from. I was on the road this weekend, and when I got back, in my network, there was an unauthorized change that I was alerted to, and then I had to go confirm it, because I was like, oh, maybe it just went offline, or it was turned off, or we had a power flicker or something. And no, indeed, my son, when he went back over to his mom's house, had taken the PS5 from its cradle.
Ooh.
Yeah, so major unauthorized change on his part, uh, that will have some repercussions. There will be some follow-on tasks in his queue this week, and maybe
I
some other
bet.
changes to his permissions in the system in terms of what he has access to, or, well, more properly, does not have access to this week. And so, because we don't abide by unauthorized change here at the Forrest household, so just going to put that out there.
So unauthorized change is managed tightly.
That's right. That's right. We also, like, I don't like seeing rogue CIs in my environment. So if I discover stuff that's not supposed to be there, I'm awfully suspicious of it. Which gets me to our next kind of topic this week. Well, actually, yeah, this is going to get us into our big deeper dive
It
in.
came from the parking lot.
It came from the parking lot. And speaking of sort of federal systems and high security environments, and areas where changing anything requires maybe what's called a PIV card, or a PIVI, when you've got one of those, or a CAC card, depending on your nomenclature, if you're DoD or GSA.
Cat.
That's
I always think of Ben the cat, or Bill
oh,
the cat. You know,
Bill Cat, yeah, and you think CAC.
you're right. Hairball. I always think, yeah, hairball.
Right, and it's that little, it's interesting, you like, I actually love the notion of it, that you carry your private key on your person at all times in a card form. Like, it's kind of like the nerd in me gets really excited.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is like, it's my walking permission slip. Like, I get to go and say, nope, I have access, I'm allowed to touch. Like, if you guys, this is going to date me real hard, but you remember, like, the teacher would ask you, hey, who wants to go in here and like make dittos for me? and you get like on the ditto machine, and you get like the purple, like that smell from like the ditto. Okay, no, I'm really old, but yeah, you
No, dude, I
out here
grew up
like,
in a print shop.
okay, yeah, you go and you pick up or make copies
Mimeograph.
for the teacher, and you get to take the special pass that says you get into the teacher's lounge,
Mhm.
right? And you're like, I shouldn't be here right now, but I'm allowed to be here because I have the special permission slip or I have the special cat card. Anyway, so this gets into a really interesting topic that is related to people doing stuff to things and the roles and the responsibilities and the permissions that they might have, especially when it comes to SecOps. Um, so this is going to be kind of a little bit of a wacky one here, and I'm gonna actually let's see if we can
The
it'll do both
if
of us
they can get
together.
in.
Whoop. I like a zealous comment here as I'm getting set up for this next demo. The extremely detailed and organized. They know where everything is at all times and how to make everything connect to each other. Yes, that is absolutely the thing that we want to make sure everybody walks away with is this notion of if you're going to be the CMDB person, it's okay for you to be very detail oriented. We like that. You should be that person. I like that as a function, as a notion.
And speaking of in the olden times, they used to call them the CMDB librarian. That used to be
Oh,
that was their gig.
see, and as somebody who has a real fondness for library and information sciences, who's that? Oh, that's right, me. I really like that idea of a steward, of a librarian. Um, you are the defender of truth. All right, so in this particular example, this comes to us, as I mentioned, from the arena of security incident response. So if you haven't played with SecOps yet, go play with it. And if you haven't taken a class with it, go check it out. But this is one part of a larger suite of applications we call security operations, and it's comprised of security incident response, or SIR, we call it for short, for SIR. Yes, sir, no, sir. And in fact, the implementation course, we lovingly call it Siri. It is also comprised of another couple of applications in the suite called vulnerability response. And no, this is not writing fan letters to Morrissey or the Smiths or the Cure talking about all of the vulnerabilities that they exposed when you listen to those records. This is about the vulnerabilities you might have in your attack surface, meaning your environments, all of the CIs that we're managing in our configuration management database. This is where we keep information about how they're configured. Well, vulnerability response tells us, oh, well, these particular devices, if they're misconfigured or if they're not locked down extra tight, might have vulnerabilities or exposures to specific kinds of exploits, and then somebody might, as they say in the biz, pwn you.
I always thought that the vulnerability thing was kind of a neat concept. When you think about the different ways that people can get in, I would use the example of like a tent. Like some tents are heat sealed, so they're taped, which is great, but not so much in Florida where it's hot.
Ooh.
Others are, threaded, which is great because they let air through, but water's not so good. So if you're in a really rainy place, that's not so good either. So those vulnerabilities or attack surfaces make sense to me when I think of these are ways that people could get in.
Yep, 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 yep. And then the last one in the suite is actually threat intelligence. There's more that go into this, like little sort of subsections, but the big three are security incident, vulnerability response, and threat intelligence. Which threat intelligence is pretty sweet. It is all of the information you have about possible attackers, their modes and methods, their motivations, where they're from, and various what we call indicators of compromise, meaning all of the ways that we might learn or understand that they have gotten into your environment and ways to remediate, right? So it's pretty cool stuff. This case, though, we're talking about something that we run into quite a bit in security incident, in that we want to typically lock down access to these sensitive bits of information in security, right? Because if there's a security incident, we don't want everybody in the environment to know, right? We want to kind of keep that information rather privileged. So usually, in what we call the out-of-box environment, the security incidents are locked down to the security incident team, right? Or security incident response team, or CERT, right? So there's a couple of basic access levels. There's like CERT read and like CERT analyst, and then there's CERT manager, and then there's SIR admin, right? So the admin is the sort of specialty admin that can be in charge of this entire application of security incident response and do all of this stuff, just in case if I am in this case, if I am the regular platform admin, like we've been talking about in our security or in our fundamentals class, right? So if you're the regular admin and you're the super of the building, there might be a floor like floor number 13 that you have to have a special badge to get on, right? And that's the security floor. So if you're the security admin, you might have one extra set of keys that the regular admin does not. And we can actually lock out the super and make the super ask for permission to get to the 13th floor. So sometimes as an admin, you might think that you have supreme absolute power, but there are times in cases like where it's security or other sensitive information like financial management or HR, where you have to get special permission from whoever's on that floor in that application to be let into that application to do the work that you might need to do to fix things or to change the plumbing or fix a fuse or something, if we're going to continue that analogy. In this case, though, it is very often the case where we want to allow people that are not part of the security response team to be able to read information about a security incident, right? Because security incidents could be, we might need to do a little bit more research, right? We might find out that somebody is leaking information outside of the building to our competitors, right? Maybe they're being blackmailed, and we want to ask our HR team a little bit of information about their compensation or have the HR team review some of their messages, or maybe they've done something a little bit sketch. We might allow, say, somebody in HR to have what we call read access or privilege access. These are what we call special access, dynamic access control rules, right? Because we don't want the HR people to always have access to the entire table, just this one incident, just this one time, right? So if I'm a security analyst, I might think, okay, cool, I'm going to add somebody to privileged access. And then when we give them privileged access, what happens is the system, there's a cool little, what we call business rule that triggers and gives them, oh, look at that, this little SNSI special access. If we look at product docs, well, it talks about how it works, right? Gives a user with special access, role, read, blah, blah, blah to those things. And then they can work on those. If they have privileged access, that means that they can work on the incident. They can comment on it. They can add in additional information to it. They can put subtasks on if they want. If they're read, then they're just allowed to give them read access. The question this week comes from, well, okay, cool. That's great and all. If I am a regular security analyst, right, and I'm going to use this cool functionality called Isaac Davenizer, or not Isaac, like impersonation to be Isaac Davenizer here. Davenizer? Davenizer. I don't know. My Isaac Anator. We're going to impersonate him for a minute. And if you're working in this part of the platform, you might go, okay, well, cool. If I'm this security analyst, shouldn't I be able to just add anybody I want? And the question was, didn't you used to be able to add anybody you wanted? Right? Because, and here I'll show you what happened here. And we're going to talk through why this is the way that it is.
Well, and it's one of those I think makes good sense if all ServiceNow is handling is just one piece. But when we realize that ServiceNow is a platform where, just like we've been talking about throughout this, human resources department, I don't know that I want my IT people to have the social security numbers and salary information and for the human resources table, or vice versa with security, the security information team to necessarily be having all the same stuff with the marketing servers or that kind of stuff.
So I've created a new security incident and I can edit these fields just fine. And our friend Isaac here is somebody who has just security analyst, right? So he can go in and he can see stuff that's open. He can work his own incidents, etc. He can modify this read and write access. And if we go ahead and submit this particular incident, he could have from the jump added Abraham Lincoln and Jimothy the cat, no problem, right? And they thought, okay, well, shouldn't I be able to do that to an existing one? So if I'm an analyst and I go, here's an existing incident and I want to modify it, right? We go, what? The little buttons that you just saw for me to be able to modify that are disappeared, right? Like we
They're
don't.
gone.
So what does this mean, right? So we dig in a little bit further and it turns out, I'm going to end impersonation here. it turns out that even when you look at docs, docs doesn't quite explain it this way. And in our own class materials, like, and it took me a while, and I had to go confirm with the product owner that this is the way that it works and why, because I suspected why. But here's how we found out. We're going deep, deep, deep today.
Well, it's kind of funny. We went from the shallow, shallow, shallow with Sean, which
I
is
know we just fell
people
off,
do stuff to things, onto the other side, which is security operations, and people who want maybe a deeper understanding of that,
but it's
in
not that
those
different,
cases.
right? It's just one more
Yeah,
task, right? Just another task table. So we,
right.
right, and
Extension of task.
so we can go and we can configure a dictionary and we can see what's going on here. There is, if we look at this particular, what we call dictionary entry. Beep, boop, boop. Actually, this is not what I wanted. Oh, maybe we do advanced view. No, I think I actually need to go look at the UI action itself, but let's find out. Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. So we've got, these allow you, and this is what's funny, right? Here's what's required. You can get write, and then it gives you the read or write. It's a little bit funny, but in order to get these, here's how we found out. Like we go and we look, and there's this cool little function. If we go in, and this is actually, we're going to use Everett's call out from earlier. We can use that table name, and you guys remember from last week that if I look up the top, I can always find out where I am. Well, we can use Everett's cool little config trick here. And this will show us all the configurations that are relevant to this table. And one of them we'll find is a cool little business rule that invokes what we call a script include. And essentially what it does is it looks to see if you have one specific role, and that role we'll see here in a second. If we look at
And while Ben's hunting these, I'm going to fill in a little bit of a gap here.
yeah, thanks.
Because in that access control, the fact that they're doing JavaScript, a lot of times that makes people go, "Oh no, it's JavaScript. It's scripting and coding." It's not too big a deal, especially since we learned that a lot of that's copy pasting of script stuff. But when Ben refers to a script include, one of the coolest things in the world is understanding that, with regard, and kind of like our concept of a library, a script include is a library of ready to use prepackaged scripts that we've written. And so all you really need to know in terms of scripting or code or fancy stuff is how to call that record from the index table of your library deck, right? So when Ben's going through the script include, what he's doing is he's saying there's a little reference here, and I'm going to call this list of already done work, which is a script include or a script library of tools.
Here we go. So we found this little guy, right? I'm going in, I'm like, what is going on with this? Why is it that I can only get to it with, like, what do I actually need to get to this thing? We can find this little guy right here. And then if we need to, we can parse through. And I can actually show you if you're really interested, since this is the deep end, right? So if you want to go, there is something called, you can go into script includes. Script includes, by the way, for those of you guys who are taking the CSA, this is one of those things that will show up on the exam. And this is, you need to be able to define a script include. And it's basically a piece of call with the middle name and really loud. Call with the middle name and really loud. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So this was, we wanted to be able to find security access utils. But yeah, what a script include is, it's just a reusable piece of code, right? It's a function that you can call from another part of the platform. Just think of it as a Lego piece, right? That you can use again and again and again and again.
Yep.
Just like a little Lego piece here. So what this does, we want to parse through it here, and we're not going to do this right now, but basically if we read through this, what this does is it initializes a special function that says, hey, if this, then that, and there's a couple of things, right? You can get read access, you can have write access, and one of the things that it does is give you access if somebody has added you to that cool little list, right? And so this is what gives us the ability to do that kind of dynamic role, and it gives you that role dynamically in the same way. And in fact, there's one other place in the platform that uses almost exactly this same function that you might also find when you start doing implementations. And that's what we call delegated development, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we get into building stuff some. But this is just one of those cool little things. And I'm going to point out some other neat little aspects here because you'll see this pattern all over the platform. You might know that we were working in the part of the platform that said security incident response, right? And it had its own little like whiz bangs and dealy bobs, and they all said security incident. Well, and this one says security support common. So this is one of those, since we're in the deep end here, this is one of those areas where this is a common set of libraries. Because remember, the security incident application is made up of multiple applications that all share common elements. You'll see this again in risk management. You'll see it again in GRC. You'll see it in HR. You'll see it in CSM. We basically take all of the common Legos that every application in a suite needs to use. And we say, you guys, you all share this common set of functions. So if you need a function, they're all in the middle table. You can go grab them anytime you need them. Just make sure you put them back in the middle table. So that's what those common applications do. And our specialty applications like security incident go, you know what? I need to check somebody's permissions. I'm going to go to the common application real quick and use that function, and it stays away from the main platform, which is the whole big building, right? But it keeps everything kind of all in reach for those little specialty applications. And then later threat intelligence can do the same thing. It can kind of come to the common table and go, oh, I need this tool for a second. I'm going to use it, and then I'm going to put it back in the middle table. So you'll see this kind of common idea a lot. And this is something that we stress really highly when we start getting people into development circles. We want you to make sure that you don't reinvent the wheel over and over and over again, because that would be really inefficient. Like, you don't want to have to rebuild the entire set of tools if both of the workshops are next to each other, right? If this platform all has access to this stuff, we don't want to have to keep replicating, because that's really inefficient. So we should be able to build it once and then use it all over.
Well, and I always think this is the super interesting thing about using script includes is just that idea that being able to grab some piece of functionality is key to architecture. Like, architecture is not necessarily being weeds deep in writing all the code. Architecture is understanding the principles and what core things you can leverage across. So many people may be looking at this and going, dude, there's purple and there's red and it's all
I
dot
don't care.
something. Yeah.
No, we know that it works, so that it's like one of those things. I know somebody has done it before. I can go copy this
Right.
and use this pattern again. Like, you see that all over. So if you remodel a house, right, what you'll see is like the same trim patterns and the same colors, and they're just slight variations, but they're all the same basic principles. This
Yeah.
happens in data too. This isn't much different than building a house, right? Or like building a car. We're just reusing shared components over and over and over again. Like, architects aren't like amazing. I mean, yeah, it takes a while to like see that pattern, but like once you understand it, you're like, oh, I can just keep doing it.
Says the guy who's built a house, built a car, but I think conceptually it's a great thing to know that those people can just, all of us, even if you didn't come into it from knowing that level of depth, if you know the big picture pieces, you're in a great spot.
Yep.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah, and I want to say, like, I didn't see who was in it. Was that Everett? I'm gonna have to refresh my LinkedIn. This is one of the things, like, when we get some of the LinkedIn comments, I can't speak back and forth, but let's see that. I'm guessing that was Mr. Spencer.
Nice.
Jinx. So very cool. Somebody that we should definitely have on the program at some point.
I would love that.
Call me Mr. Spencer. All right. So this is going to get us to we're about 10 minutes to the top of the hour, give or take, and this is about the time where we open up the show for questions. So that was our parking lot to find out how that happened, why that happened. Oh, and I forgot to explain that. Let me land this plane real quick. So the answer was, didn't we used to be able to do it that way, and why can't we? And the answer was no. We were never able to just, if I'm an analyst, I was never able to just add somebody to one of those records baseline. I had to either create the incident and add them at time of incident creation, because that's the only way to circumvent that, what we call that business rule lookup that little guy does, right? Because if the record doesn't exist yet, there's no way to check it. So we can add anybody we want because the record doesn't exist yet, and so you can just put somebody on the incident if you know that you need to add them. In order to change that after the fact, they thought, well, it's a pain to go ask the admin, but let's think this through from a process perspective for a minute. Like, why would we want to check or confirm with the admin before we add any old user anywhere from the platform to an existing security incident? Why don't you guys, we'll let chat think about it for a second. I'll put that in the chat. Like, why would it be a good idea to check with the sec admin prior to adding any user a security? That's right now, that's the only way that you could do it. You have to have that role in order to do that. So in order to actually perform that function, you have to have that role.
Role specific security for direct functions for why.
Right. So
Think
if
about
we
the work anyone has to do, right? In any area, it wouldn't just be security from my way of thinking. I can think of a lot of areas that could be very tricky.
right, HR would be the same way,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, I'll just add my buddy Nick. He seems to know all about this to the human resources database because
Right.
I'm stuck on this.
Right.
Because yeah, and I don't remember the answer. It'd be easy to call Nick, and Nick can
Gosh,
figure it
that
out.
would make me really nervous as the lead on a security team or an HR team, right? I'd probably want to ask somebody to do it, right? Or create a catalog item to request it to be done on my behalf that somebody could then make an approval for.
And even more, have a record of because
Right.
man,
How
I
did
just
how did
I
Jimothy the cat get on this incident? Dude
right.
Lebowski, who's this guy? Right.
I asked my buddy to do this for me, and she was great. She got this set up,
Yep.
and now why are we here? Everybody's pointing fingers, and how did she get access? I don't.
Right. So when we think about it from that perspective, even though we're the admins and you might think, well, I get that, like I'm responsible. I'm the admin. I do stuff all the time. I have absolute power and I always know to use it judiciously. Yeah, and Roy,
Yeah, that's beautiful.
yep,
That
right there. That is definitely the key. And I gotta just go,
Well played.
that is absolutely the correct response. Separation of duties, right? So we want to make sure that we're checking these things with somebody. And you'll see this pattern repeated in the GRC application, right? Like you might see this with what we call evidence requests and all sorts of things, right? So this is a really useful notion. And since we're the admin, if we need there to be a change process later in the summer, we're going to get into catalog items, right? As part of as part of this process, and you would use a flow designer flow to say, you know what, let's initiate a request to add, Jimmy the cat or Dude Lebowski or my friend Nick, right, to this particular incident, and we can get an approval and we'll just automate that approval, right? But we'll have a record in a table that says Ben requested that somebody be added, so and so approved it, or in some cases didn't not approve it, so it automatically did happen. They had a chance to shoot it down before it went through because we want to move fast,
yeah.
so on and so on and so on, right? So this is, we get into this notion where sure, we could change the behavior. I could just like short circuit that access control rule and say, you know what, let's just give everybody in the group security admin privileges, or just remove the security admin privilege requirement from that from those lists. But I don't think that would be a good idea, right? It would be better to either have a discussion within your security team to say, do we want to allow everybody to have this right? And if you have that right, you need to understand the consequences of it. Or do we create a process that allows for a request? So just some little food for thought here in our parking lot question from this week. And I really appreciate that one coming to us. And remember, if you guys have a question for it, came from the parking lots, you can attend one of our classes and or hit us up directly. You can reply to this post, we'll put it on there. And then also this week, we want to make sure that we give you guys time to ask about anything, really. So this is
Yeah.
now into the Ask Us Anything portion of the show. And this is what we're going to do. So if we don't have questions, and we'll give everybody kind of a minute, and just remember that all summer long we'll be doing this. You can hit us up, ben.forrest at servicenow.com. You can hit us up on here. Sean, I don't know if you want to also.
Absolutely. Feel free to follow up with me at sean.mclean at servicenow.com.
Yep.
Or either of us on the LinkedIn or YouTube channel that this is streaming through, and we'll do our best to keep an eye and follow and bring those things up. It's not without that. It's those questions that will help drive content that will get you the information that would be valuable.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll give everybody a couple seconds to internalize that. If you've had a burning question, I've seen a couple come through, and I answered a few on the community. I was also going to say, like, selfishly, if we had some time, we could talk about how we want to use the platform the way that we want to, and kind of get back into first principles stuff. But we'll keep this open for questions. So you can ask us anything. It can be fundamentals related. It can be security related. It can be whatever you want. It could
Be
also be
roles
like,
related or
that's
work
right.
related, or how do I get into taking these courses related. Or I will tell you, I got to tell you honestly, I'm going back through courses and doing the fundamentals and the simulator for no, not the fundamentals, but the analytics,
Oh,
and going back through the simulator is awesome, as is the class and the workflow. And I love it. I look for classes now that are simulators in Now Learning, but that whole thing where I have to wake it up and then wait, and then by the time I get back, it's gone to sleep, or that almost becomes a cadence that I have to practice. Like I have to like log into the class and then realize that I got to open up a simulator. So some of that stuff takes me a little getting used to. And I'd imagine if I was not in now, in internal, those would be kind of trippy things. So questions like that too, throw them out there.
so if we don't end up with some questions, we might move on to some of the predictions and/or obsessions that we've got in Notes from the Edge, stuff that we're learning and/or um, things that we think are happening in the community. Some of this stuff's, not particularly new for us, but like this is stuff that I've been kind of obsessed with for a while. Two notions that have been really, really big, and I've seen some creator toolbox and academy sessions on this on the community and on the dev program. For me this week, I want to talk about, in terms of my obsessions, I'll talk about decision tables and why I think they're the bee's knees. So I'm going to put that in there. Ooh, so Roy's got a question though before I get into decision tables. Oh, all right.
Let's
So,
see.
all right, caller, you're on the line. Can I turn off the navigation refresh when somebody clicks on the logo in the top left, my company logo? I keep clicking it by mistake when I want to click all. Ooh, so the
Ooh,
answer
that's an
is this
interesting
one.
one.
Now, I really love this for a couple of reasons. There's a couple things that we could talk about, and I'm gonna give you the kind of major notion here.
Hmm.
There's a couple ways to do this, right? It really depends. Well, of course, I hate saying that, but it depends on a few things. But if we're talking about the classic view, and I'm assuming Roy that you're talking about kind of the classic view and not say a portal, um, right? So if I go in here and I'm looking at here, if we click, this is the one you're talking about, right? So I'm guessing where I click on the logo, wanting to click, oh, okay, can I turn off the navigation? Right. So I go to click all and I accidentally boop, I want to do this number, right? And instead I end up with sort of like refreshing the entire thing is what it sounds like. Instead, like, I wanted to be able to just click all.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons like the old school part of me goes, I have two thoughts about this. Like I like to keep this pinned, even though it makes I would say that the UI folks hate it when I do this because they don't want me to demo anything like this without with it pinned. That's their preference is to have it. You
Out
go
of
to
the way and disappear unless you need it.
right. We want
That's
these
their new
this
UI method.
right. And I would also maintain that this particular view is for a dwindling few. Right. This is a view that very few of us are privileged enough to see anymore. Um, because eventually, what this is all geared towards is these workspaces, right?
Hmm.
So when we get into the workspace, that of course pops in a new tab in some cases. In other cases, it like actually these days in San Diego, it doesn't actually have to pop into a new tab anymore because those libraries are preloaded.
Yep.
But you'll note that like a lot of the reason that the UI is down over here in these tab areas is they kind of push you into the workspace, etc. And you'll note that when I'm here, this is all changed and we can turn this on and off. But to get back to Roy's question, the answer to the question, the query, yep, we can right click, and this is one of those interesting areas where we can go in and actually inspect, where we used to be able to. Let's see here.
Oh, you're gonna get clever and tricky. As you're doing that and getting into that code layer, I'm gonna tell you, you're
Oh, were you
traipsing
gonna?
upon my potential retirement program.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, is this one of those? Like we
I
just.
don't know, but I would say as a my first step to anything before I dive into this, or I dive into layers of code that make someone like me go, "Ooh, looks a little creepy and codey."
Yeah, yeah. Checking
I
properties.
always check system properties, and I always look to see. So when we talk about tables, it's handy to know that a lot of ServiceNow's global behaviors are handled by a table called, quite literally, system properties. Now, there are bunches of different ways to navigate to the system properties for one piece like ITSM, or for any of the other platforms that Ben was talking about, right? CSM or the other ones. But if you want to turn it off permanently, before we get into editing the UI itself, you might check in system properties to see if there is a system property that does that. And that's always my first check. And the only reason I say it's my retirement program is because I have seen so many people. There's no nice way to say this, but I have seen so many people hack architect, break things, spend hours in building something only to find out that there's a system property that you can go false and you're done.
Right,
So
right. So I, you know, sometimes I get too tricky for myself. I get
I
too
don't
tricky.
know if it's in there. And that's the thing. So, Roy, my only thing that I want to warn you is always, 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 always check to see if there's a system property for it. There's 2,000 of them. So it may take you 15 minutes to kind of scan before you get into really turning it off. But check that one.
Ooh, and I'm trying to remember. It is. What's it? It's like one of these guys up here, and I can't remember. There's like the logo icon, parallel, Apple icon, home pages. Yeah, it's one of these. Like,
There is
and
one for it. I
I
didn't.
don't
I,
think there's
I
one
don't
specific.
know, but I always want to check.
I know that there's like banner, go banner, URL, title, mouse over banner style, URL target, right? And you can see that it's main. I wonder if we just leave it blank. And that search real-time banner ID. So part of me just wonders if we just leave it blank, if it'll do nothing. There's probably also like a sys property somewhere to turn it off, I would just guess. Like Sean's usually right on this one. And in fact, I tend to spend like an inordinate amount of time searching through. Nah, it still refreshes me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, just as a method for all of those weird, those kind of like, I don't know and I don't know where. I'd rather like, I want to see where Ben goes with it, but just as a rule of thumb, the first check just in case.
Oh yeah,
Because
yeah. Because I was gonna go straight to hacking it. I was like, well, you can find out where it is, and then sometimes you can use that to reverse engineer. Because sometimes, well,
ah,
here's my order of operations. Usually, I will go and check sys properties first, or I will inspect. Here's how I go about this. I inspect to see if I can figure out what they're calling it, because sometimes it's not always like apparent what the element is, right? And so I'll look. Okay, so here's image logo light green. ServiceNow landing page, right? So Polaris header logo. So this gives me a little bit of like a starting place to try and investigate. And then I might go, okay, I know we're in the next experience. I might need to go into docs and look at, right? Some of this stuff is not as well documented as I was like, as I would like.
that's
Um,
brilliant though, because you're using the element from the.
all right, Rob, Mr. Fedoric, you can quote me on this one. Yes, I agree with you on the docs. Like we could be doing better. Um, I agree. However, we are moving fast and breaking things. So let me get into banner, right? So mobile banner, modified banner, style banner, banner logo link, right? So like sometimes I'm looking through this stuff and I go, okay, like maybe I could turn this on. San Diego now platform user. Ooh, okay. From main. Oh, look at that. Okay, so we found some stuff.
Did
Yeah, URL target frame used. Interesting.
it also looks like Everett has a community article up on it?
Oh, well, I think he's got that for Zella's next question, which was
I
going to
was
be
zealous question.
next
Okay.
experience. Yeah. Um, So safe harbor, all of that stuff. You know, the notion is that those things are coming. In terms of like other themes, you can modify the themes, and I'm sure um, that particular link from Everett is probably, and we'll take a look here in a minute, but it's probably a way to do that. I have started to mess with it because I needed my rainbow theme back. I needed my purples, and all of that from my next experience here at home. I wanted it to be my unicorn sanctuary here. Um, but yeah, I was going straight and having to modify some of the CSS or the cascading style sheet stuff and using some of those. But it looks like examples how to modify the banner. Oh, this is actually pretty sweet. I don't think I've ever seen this one. Position text, HTML, control the window title, labels, apply background image, CSS rules that apply this change. Bam. Okay, that's cool. But this is the associate primary glide primary image. Oh, sick. Okay, this is actually cool. So I can change some of the specific behavior to Roy, and this is kind of where I was going first, just to figure out like, okay, I know I can modify the behavior in the CSS and the style sheet. And before the next experience, that would have been my go-to. I would have commented out the URL just to like kind of quick, just turn it off, right? Or rather than comment it out, maybe make a quick flag to a system property that some like an admin could easily modify, because that's a smarter change for me. I don't want to have to comment out code and then have to remember that I commented it out. I'd rather just do a system property and then label and document the system property that I made a change for. That's kind of my go-to for those, so that I'm not doing stuff that somebody has to call me up for, many years down the line, or just Z-boot it and then curse my name.
Right.
Um,
Or you get called from the new position that you've been promoted to over the past 3 years to go, oh, now you have to go fix this thing that you messed with 3 years ago, and you're going, wait,
right?
where was that?
Ben touched it last.
Right.
Show me on the instance report where the developer touched you. Is sort of the yes, I will consider logging in. All
Nice.
right, sounds like get me out of here. Tank, I need an exit. All right.
Well, we've got a great one in the Celis question as well.
Yes, yes. Okay, cool. Like, thanks, Isella, for for bailing us out there.
Well played.
So the next question is, speaking of next experience, as Ella says, can we change the themes? Is that in the works? And specifically, the org is not yet in the next experience. And I would say you're not alone. I think this freaked out a couple people. It's 3 environments, and as devs, we have to set a theme for each environment. Right. Right. And as a matter of fact, I will reveal to you a little thing here. You might notice. So I'm gonna peel back the curtain here. Again, we're all friends here. So if I go to training ServiceNow, so this is what we use internally, right? Because we always make sure to use our own stuff. No shame in our game. Right? You might notice something really specific here. If I do a real quick stats.do, yes, we are, as a matter of fact, on the San Diego build. You might notice this is not using the next experience yet. So you're not alone. Even some folks, even though they are encouraging us to move towards that, not all of us have moved yet for this very specific use case. Now, the next experience, like all of the UI builder stuff, is targeted for Tokyo to be able to do all the cool bells and whistles, right? And early adopters and all of that stuff can move into the next experience and start playing with this. And if you've got folks that are really good with messing with cascading style sheets, yeah, absolutely. Go in there and feel free to add some and change them out. And I believe Everett's got a really good community article on this, right? But yeah, it's got to be, the theming is there and you can build them. We just haven't built out the worked examples like we have in the past before, or made it particularly easy without using UI Builder. And UI Builder is code complete, it's feature complete, but I would say that a lot of folks are just kind of waiting a little bit longer, sort of like they did with Flow Designer. And again, this is just my opinion, not like I do not represent my boss here in the training organization at Taco, the training and certification org, etc. This is sort of my take on it. And Sean, feel free to chime in here too. I would say that a lot of folks are just kind of waiting just a little bit longer to see sort of what happens in terms of some of the features, because we saw some really cool stuff coming up for the next release that might make a lot of this a little bit easier. But there were a lot of people itching to go to the next experience early. And so, yeah, we were really eager to get that out there into people's hot little hands. So we go to training. This is another thing that I'm going to mention here, by the way. This is a good practice that we don't talk about in system administration, but is one that folks should know about. Like, right, when you have multiple environments, oftentimes as a fail safe, because I don't know about you guys, but I've done this a bunch where I've accidentally updated the wrong environment. And so we make our development
Guilty.
environment, yep, we make our development environment like ugly as sin on the top. So the training dev team is the nacho cheese color, right? For the dev environment. If I go to sandbox, we'll also be able to see, here's like the production environment. If I go to training sandbox here, I believe that is also another color. I also like the fact that we have training sandbox too, and it's our blue moldy taco. Or maybe it's just the blue corn, right?
It
Whatever
could
that
be
is.
the yeah. I was thinking more blue corn,
Okay.
which is let's be real, kind of yummy.
It is good stuff. Right. So we've got a sandbox, and sandbox is where we let people who are citizen dev adjacent or folks that want to try something out to pitch before they get into the real dealy here. Is this gonna come on now? Why is it not letting me change my password here? But anyway, you get the idea. If I go in here and I go to sandbox, my password my password manager is just being fussy. Anyway, but we've got, the same kind of deal as you do. So we know it's coming. If you want to be able to change it, I'm going to actually check out, I'm going to reload this thing here and see what Everett just put into the chat in terms of cool.
He put a great sum of the context that we're talking about there. I think probably from the community article. And Isela, to your point, yes, those are little tacos there. That's kind of our theme and our gig and our little drive.
It was like one of those cool things. I feel like it was fan driven. So internally we were calling, I think a lot of learning groups are called learning and development, or L&D. And I think that happened for a while. And then we realized that we could be training and certification. And then a few of us just kept adding the organization, just so that we could acronym it to taco.
Now you've got to probably, because bacronyming is one of those things that I had never heard of until I met you, and I just thought that was fantastic. The idea of a acronym to backdate an acronym to fit your
Oh
needs.
yeah, it happens all the time. Sometimes,
right.
so it happens. Like you'll notice that it happens quite often in congressional bill naming conventions, right? So like right now, there's one called CHIPS, and I think it's like I don't remember what it is specifically, but it's about like improving something access to like processors, right?
Yeah. And then there's, I mean, it's all over in ServiceNow when we talk about things like discovery with Shazam and all of those. I don't think Shazam ever got backronymed. It was one of those.
No. The mid server was backronym. They now call it multi instrumentation and discovery, but it was just the mid, as in it was in the middle.
It's kind of in the middle. So we got to come up with a name that makes it be in the middle. So yeah.
Oh, and this is an Ashley Schneider jam, who, like, you guys, if you don't follow our community already or on LinkedIn, you should definitely, because she is rad, and her blog actually went into some serious detail on a lot of the theming stuff here, because she went down and did the wonderful, sometimes we refer to this as yeoman's work, which I think is a disservice, right? Like, oh well, she was just doing like the thing that we would all do if we had the time. But you know what? No, she like did an amazing bit of documentation and doing all the work that a lot of us wanted to be able to do but didn't have the time to, and also like is just rad in her own right. So you should definitely follow her. But yeah, so I've seen this article before, and there's also a really wonderful walkthrough that she does on her own website, which I'll link to that in the show notes as well. Because definitely she is one of those amazing MVPs out there in the community, just doing crazy cool work. So
yeah, some of the design docs and background docs, I'm like, oh, that's where that came in.
Yep. You know, and it's funny too, because in a when you I think a lot of people don't realize when you get to be an organization of this size, sometimes it's fan driven. And that's one of the cool things about our company, right? Not fan driven, but like we are our own fans internally. And so when we make a push for something, it happens in a way that I've just never seen it in another company. Which is pretty neat because one, I never was trusted to be an adult at any other company I worked at previously. Oh, thanks Everett for throwing that in here. Yeah, her blog is legit, guys.
Perfect.
Um, Way cool stuff in there. Um, Hardcore for sure. I like to think that we play, Sean, and you and I kind of play in the space of like, let's all just stay in the shallows here for a minute, but like give you the guide to the cliff diving a little bit
Yeah.
on where they can kind of go hang out. But like we're really good at the kind of like, all right, guys, let's put your floaties on, right? And maybe give some bigger generalized context for folks that are kind of more generalists. But yeah, Ashley's stuff is great. The thing about working here though is and working in this environment, and I think working in a space where you have influence and pull, and this is also like something that I wanted to uh, should I get on a soap, like where's my soapbox? Like I think I left my soapbox downstairs.
Did you leave it over with the mash and the malt and the beer making, or over with the cats?
I I think the cats might have taken it because I know that they were kind of getting a little irritable with who I had cat sitting on this week. uh,
Oh.
and they were demanding more kibble. There was
Mm.
a little bit of a rant downstairs earlier, just before the show. Jimothy was definitely singing the song of his people on top of said soapbox. Anyway, I think it often happens, and this is something I see on LinkedIn where people kind of get this discussion, and it's the us versus them, or the developer versus project manager versus business analyst versus anybody.
Yeah.
When at the end of the day, this is all a question of like, what are we trying to do? What are the outcomes? And I think that we all are trying to do the right thing. And I think that people get really passionate about how they are trying to achieve the outcomes, right? And I want to talk about that, I guess, a little bit if we don't have more questions on some things, because I think this is very pertinent to people that are platform admins because they get hit up all the time. Like, do this thing for me. I want to be able to do X. Can you do Y? Right? I want this access control rule. I want this table. I want. Gimme, gimme, gimme. And then sometimes I think some of the folks who are the sort of shepherds of the platform, they're like, well, I want to give you what you want, but I don't really understand your demands. I don't understand like why you want to do it, and you won't give me context, right? So you get this kind of out of context thing, and then as the system administrator, you're kind of expected to have sort of an omnipotent understanding of every desire that they might have. I
Well,
don't know if you've heard that kind of from folks before.
right. Or the flip side of that, which is I'd like to tell you that the long-term effects of what you could be doing will, and the person who needs, wants, desperately is seeking that thing may not be willing to or able to or have the to understand the long-term ramifications to which the admin owns. And like you said, it's that positioning going, hey, we're all trying to accomplish the same thing, but this, and it's so funny because when you say that, like between tech and process, there is often that kind of
It
us
feels
and
like us
them.
versus them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of an interesting challenge to kind of manage. It's also probably interesting for folks who are coming in and going, well, that's great that you're talking about being an administrator, and I get that, or I'm taking this certification, but what's the job like? What are some of the challenging parts?
Right. So the part that
Well,
sometimes might be really frustrating, right? And so this might be a fun one for folks coming in later down the line. Maybe we let them rant a little bit just to kind of give them the good and the bad, like the good, the bad, and the ugly, right?
right?
But
Or
there's
ahem, he says with a long eyebrow at some of those people who are sitting on our active and in our feed that we've talked about before, maybe coming in to join us for some of
who've
those
worn
conversations.
those, yeah, who've definitely worn those shoes before. Those
Hmm.
folks out there who have done this, who would like to kind of speak to some of this. But I know that one of the things that can be frustrating about this or any other system that you are the shepherd of, right? That you are responsible for, doing maintenance and keeping it running and making sure that it's cared and fed for, right? You're the stable master. You're the super of the building. You're the person who people come to when there's an issue with whatever's happening in the instance. Like something's not working right, the lights are flickering, the toilet's stopped up, right? And they come to you, right? You get some sort of, you yourself get a request or an incident, some sort of task, right? And we use our own platform to manage those things. And you're just like starting to crank through them, even though they want you to be building other stuff or kind of taking care of other things or building out reports. And they're like, you have the access, you have the power, right? Help us. And sometimes I would say that people's lack of understanding, and I understand why they don't understand why the system doesn't work the way that they want it to, or like they don't understand what they're asking for. One of our jobs, I'd say, whether we're an admin or a developer or an architect, is to always ask follow-up questions. And there's a series of 5 follow-up questions that I always ask. Like, like,
The
do you know?
five whys.
I was gonna say, like, yeah, you know what they are, right, Sean? Like, they're my 5 favorite questions. They're why, right?
Yep.
Why? Why?
And how does that make you feel?
How does that make us feel? Sometimes it makes us feel hecka
Why
frustrated,
do you right?
right?
Why would you want to do? Can you explain more to me about that?
But this is a drum that has been beaten by every consultant, in every platform, in every system ever,
Yeah.
going all the way back to the back in the day, like way, 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 way back. And Chuck Tomasi even started with this question several times, like when he was an admin, and people would come and say, like, I want this thing, and then you have to go, wait, what you're asking for, like your default response might be like, what you're asking for sounds crazy. I don't understand. Like, what is it that you're trying to do? And then they tell you what they're trying to do. And
Yeah.
then you go, oh, okay, but why don't, like, what about the other thing, that like the other way that like I built, or the one that's out of the box, or like baseline, what is it that's preventing you from using that? And then they tell you that they need
Right.
this thing, right? And sometimes you feel like you're going in a circle, around and around and around and around. And the question of why has to be, well, why do you want this? Like, not what, not how, not who, but why?
Right.
Right? Like, what is the, like, what is the underlying root cause of this thing? And it's always why, right? And I think that in our rush sometimes to just get the request like pushed back through out into the world, like it's just really easy for us to go either do one of two things. Okay, and you just do it, or no, that's dumb. No, right?
Right? I was gonna say they're both sides and they both have incredible costs. I
Yeah.
remember a conversation in a long time ago on the process side of the house. And the concept goes to the idea of back in the day before ideation, when change was anyone could submit
But
change.
John, we don't use idea management or demand management here, so
Oh,
we couldn't
right.
possibly do that.
Before even those ancient times, someone came through and had a request for a different system, asking for an additional they wanted a change made to the number system for PO ordering. And it seemed like a crazy request. And over time it was like, well, why you need a zero added? That's ridiculous. Why would
What
you
was,
need a
what
zero
was
added?
what was crazy about it?
Well, it was one of those. It's easier to say no, right? And there's so much other backing up we'd have to do. But as it turned out, the reason was because for that particular system of record, which goes way back pre-ServiceNow, they were trying to add a zero because they needed another digit to a sale they were trying to make, and without being able to get the PO to record the extra digit for the amount of the sale. So, instead of tens and ones and thousands and hundreds of thousands, they needed an extra zero to make it millions. And the answer for that was no. So sometimes even the smallest of changes, our tendency is to go, well, that's why would you even bother? But then when you understand the why, you're like, oh, this makes sense.
Right. That context would have been really helpful, right?
Right. It's
Sometimes
yeah.
people don't
And
know.
and
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say sometimes people don't know, like they just get the request from their boss and then they just like they're playing telephone and they just forward it to you. They've been given a directive and they go like, "Oh, here's my solution to the directive," and then they don't give you the directive originally, right? And then we don't
Yep.
have context. That's why, you know what? Actually, this is another opportunity for me to just like, I'm going to put in here because this is so helpful. Um, give a shout out to Mr. Mike Cohen, actually, since we're talking about like context and, dare I say it, requirements and user stories.
Mm, story splitting.
That's right. Yeah, Mountain Goat Software.
Oh, fantastic. Well, and while you're posting that, one of the things I think again to bring up, we kicked this off, or I say we, and I'm going you, man, because I'm just a dude along for the ride.
And
But
this, you make it fun. Like it's nice to have a co-host. It's way
it's
harder
always
to do
fun to
this
hear.
like talking to myself.
But when you first brought this and started running it, one of the things that now, and I will say we on this end, we're both thinking about were the people coming in to take this class who might not have background in
And
a platform like ServiceNow and wanting to understand what a lot of the role is. And one of the things that I think is cool, but also core is just to Ben's point that regardless of what of the many different roles you could play doing work in the platform, whether you're a process expert passing requirements or an administrator managing a platform, or whether you're a developer, or whether you're not necessarily a process expert but a power user even who has been invited as a stakeholder for new things being built on the platform, one of the core things to understand is part of the day to day in your role. And I've seen this from interviews with admins to developers, or is trying to find common ground and doing the interpretation, though we all may be speaking the same language, to make sure you're pulling out enough context to understand these. And that's part of the work element that goes, regardless of if the coding part is easy or the development is drag and drop or whatever, making sure you understand that context is a lot of what gets done. I'd love to see anyone else in the feed who can back that up, because I'm quite sure some of you out there that are developers spend a fair amount of time in requirements meetings,
oh
just
my
maybe.
goodness. Well,
So
yeah, and so this is the weird kind of gray area too, like kind of the liminal space between being an admin and somebody that's being, for better or worse, they are typically being kind of moved towards this development angle, right? They want you to be both. This is why DevOps is a thing. Like they want you to be both
sure.
the developer and the operator, because we want to be able to do it quickly and we want to be able to do it in a way that just like seems seamless. Um, and of course, this would be the silver bullet, right? But I think it's about, it's more than just like it's more than just the framework or like slapping a shiny label on it. It's also about understanding the context and the business pain, and even as a new developer, you might be the expert in databases and what's possible, like or what some of us might refer to as the technical conscience in the room. That is a role that I'm the Jiminy Cricket of technical aspects sometimes when we're doing like requirements.
I
Like,
love that.
excuse me, but that's not technically possible, right?
I'm stealing that one.
And of course it is. Like you're the expert, right? You can do anything because you have the superpower of being a developer, and like part of you wants to go, yes, yes, I am a superhero, right? I can do anything I want because I am a developer. Yes, you better believe that I am like I can do anything that I want with this engineering prowess. Or like I want everybody to believe it, but then you also go like, but no, like I would be giving you the power to harm yourself, right? Or no,
If I'm
what you
bringing
asked
these
for
down
is,
into, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just made myself laugh. Um, yeah, I don't remember where I was going. Oh yeah, I might just give you the power to harm yourself, right? Or like I'm giving you the ability to undo all of the good work that you would rather like. This is why I want to always go back to outcomes, because sometimes like everybody in the room wants to get into solutioning without thinking about like what the outcome is.
Yeah, on almost any design, we always go back to that. But it wouldn't need to be it wouldn't need to be a thing in every single book if everybody would do it, but everybody doesn't.
Because it's, you know what? Sometimes comment like that element is not exciting. It's not sexy. I can't slap a brand on it.
Right.
So then I can't sell another book, right? And so this is why I'm not selling a book. I'm just like trying to go like, okay, can we just like back up for a second and talk about some of these outcomes? And I think there have been lots of really great books that kind of reiterate this point and put a new coat of paint on it necessarily because we obviously have not learned the lesson.
Right. It's that part that always kills me is it's like we keep going back through and going, hey, and even just like you said, a new coat of paint to say, what an amazing new idea. Spend time understanding the need for outcomes. Actually make sure we understand the context and potential ramifications. I loved Jonathan Jardy, his thing, which we still use in our implementation, right? The
Yep.
illities. How does this manage for scalability, upgradability, administrative ability? All of the illities that we're looking at when we go to solution something is kind of a critical thing. And it's a huge part of any one of those roles. So whether we're talking admin now, which everybody's focused on from CSA, or implementer later, or maybe specific suite administrator, not the platform, but you're an administrator of, and in particular, we talk about, Ben talked about security, right? You think about vulnerability and threat intelligence and security incident response. What's amazing is even in one field, security operations, those are three completely different disciplines.
Oh
And they
yeah.
are so deep that getting them to have a mutual or a common understanding sometimes can be hours of meetings, and being willing to take the time to go, let me make sure I understand why this matters or why this doesn't matter quite so much, or what are the implications. But then those three teams, they have to go back and do the same thing with the platform admin. So if you wanted a single common thread for things to get good at, it's the patience and understanding ability to dive into contexts that are not your own, and be familiar with them.
Right. Cause I think we're in a hurry. Like we're all trying to move fast and break things. And I think that oftentimes we think that like our understanding is the correct one. And I think sometimes what I do, and I think that you probably also do this, is you try to approach everything as if, like, even if you suspect for half a second that you might be what somebody would consider a domain expert, you come at it as if
Fast and
you're
break things.
just completely open, right? Just like I'm gonna come at this as if I'm just listening right first, right? I'm just trying to understand your context, and then I'm just trying to make sure that I calibrate for your specific issue before I even say my first word half the time. Like if I'm doing this from a consultative approach, right? And I'm not trying to say anybody's right or wrong. I'm just trying to understand the issue first, right? And then I'm asking lots of questions, and some of them are pointed.
Yep. Yeah, and I think sometimes that piece is a delicate art form, and that's kind of a cool opportunity because it's not something we can teach. Well, it's something that it is an art form. It's something that takes practice.
It takes practice. It's like playing an instrument, and I think that
Yeah,
I find that there are you get to a certain level of competence, and then people trust. Like they throw you into an implementation, they throw you into the room, and they go, "Okay, you got this. You're good." And you either
yeah,
sink or swim, or you get lucky enough to do a ride along with somebody that's really skilled at it, and then you watch them go, and then you're trying to pick apart and listen and watch all of the interactions and trying to figure out what is it that they just did to make, like, how did they just make this magically happy, right?
yeah,
And that's the piece where you see like a bajillion business books and sales guides, and right, so often like a lot of the books are all focused on the sales techniques, right? Because we want to be flashy, right? We don't want to focus on the fundamentals or the core kind of the attributes or the character traits, right, that take work, those
yep,
things that are less sexy. It's rather it like you just go straight to the tips and the tricks and the fast flashy, like, and this is the thing, like none of it is fast, none of it is flashy. You have to have like you have to walk into these things like with a certain amount of humility every time. And that's the one key component that I've noticed again and again and again from all the people that I admire that are successful in this realm is you have to be confident in yourself, but also be like humble enough not to come in and say like I have the answer, because every
yeah.
time you come in and have the answer, like you will eat your teeth like every time. somebody will punch you in the back of the face, or you will absolutely do a face plant and as I said, eat your own teeth, like in the most embarrassing way. And I learned that early and often in my 20s, and somehow getting lucky doing some of this stuff, right? So for those who are just coming up, I think that that's a big one, that you have an opportunity as an admin to listen to so many people and then respond. Like you have, like, this is actually kind of a, like, this is not a bad topic actually.
Yeah, I think it's another whole window for opportunity discussion. There'd be a great one, and this is where I go, "Ooh, we have some cool guests to potentially bring
Yeah,
in for some of these."
this is
I
a good
can't
one.
wait.
Oh
But
man.
but
All right, producers, aka like me and Sean, like in the background, like, guys, like, we have another show like just lined up now. Like, I'm like, okay, where do we fit this in the thing?
yeah. One thing I do want to circle back to, and before I double check us all to see if there are other pieces that we're getting to or that we're missing that anyone else has questions on, is to just come back and go. So we've covered in our office hours from the most basic platform, but people do stuff to things, right? User, task, and table, to access controls and dynamic access controls and why they matter. So down onto the deeper side, and little bits and pieces about script includes, the library of scripts that you can call, into the bigger design things. So we've kind of gone from shallow end to deep end to really big broad end, right?
Yeah, we
All the
got
way.
we got a little bit of stuff, and I hope that for those of you guys who are just like, you're along for the ride this week because you're like, oh well, I'm just getting introduced to this thing. Somebody told me that ServiceNow is cool, and I'm going to take the fundamentals, or I'm taking the fundamentals, or I'm in the next gen program, or I'm just here because somebody told me that Ben and Sean are interesting and people like listening to them. Welcome everybody, and I hope that some of the stuff that we've been talking about, you can find some sort of use in your professional life, your personal life. This is sort of the thing, like, that I know that I'm constantly trying to find these little tiny edges and apply them wherever I can, whether it be consulting, whether it be design, whether it be just trying to get better at teaching people about some of these concepts. And I hope that you guys keep bringing the questions. So everything from the technical to the personal, like, I don't mind. Like, let's bring it all. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I agree completely. So are there other pieces that we've missed, or other questions kind of from the from the gallery, from the crowds, from the folks?
I might get us into the edge slash professor predictions and kind of give some of the
Ooh,
topics that we really want to get to, and then we'll finish up with some extra credit for today.
I like it. Okay.
So this is a segment where kind of now, like, we're trying to, like, we're still figuring it out, right? Because this is an iterative process, y'all. So we're calling it, we called it notes from the edge, the stuff that, like, is like on the bleeding edge, and or like the Cliff's notes. Like, that was a little bit of a double entendre, um, from instructors about course materials and or things that we find particularly interesting about the space and or the work that we do. So what do we think is worth paying attention to right now? And I would say that some of the things that I am particularly interested in at the moment, and have been paying attention to a lot, especially in this latest release here in San Diego, um, even though a lot of the stuff that I've been working with is decoupled from the family release, it's happening to coincide with this. We'll talk about that more later. I am all about decision tables of late, and I think I started to kind of talk about that a little bit.
Mhm.
We dove into another question, and decision tables are this kind of like unsung hero of the change request process, and then got their time in the sun with Decision Builder, which is a long time coming. I don't like, I for the longest time had wished that Decision Builder existed. And essentially, here's the TLDR and why it matters and why, like, I think that it's useful. There are so many times when you're going out and building a flow designer flow where you want to be able to do, if it is um, raining in I don't know. If it's raining in Washington, D.C. on a second Tuesday and a blue moon, then send this particular technician, right? If it is any other day, send like this technician to this location. Or if it is, right, like any number of combination of things, right? It could be, in cases of change requests, if it is a critical piece of hardware, and it's a particularly nasty vulnerability, since we're talking about security earlier, and there is a active exploit that is being actively exploited somewhere out in the world right now, then we need to make an emergency change and pre-authorize it and or do it automatically and update like a particular piece of software or change a configuration or just pull the whole thing offline, right? Any number of combinations you can do in a spreadsheet, you can upload into Decision Builder. And it used to be that you would have to build out a wacky, crazy, enormous workflow to do all of the if this, then that kind of combinatorial things. And instead, you can now choose one action that says make a decision. You point it at the decision table or the decision builder. And if the current conditions line up, then the right decision is made. So this is kind of a beautiful thing. I'm gonna put some notes in the show or in the show notes section online about this particular dealie that that I've been using a lot for a couple of different projects lately.
Fascinated with and tied to, right?
Yep, and it was actually something that I used to build a solution for our own training environment. So um,
Perfect.
put that into the notes. And Sean, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to kind of call out in terms of like what you're paying attention to at the moment.
Well, and I will. It seems to me like decision tables are almost as if someone took what was always the challenge in the world of ITSM of prioritization, right? Impact times urgency equals priority. But what about, and then we have this, and so we built that table to handle that matrix, but it's almost like they templatized that matrix and said, rather than just use it for this, wouldn't it be great if we had an engine that did it for whatever you want to put it to? So I'm totally with you on the decision tables being super interesting. For me, I am always the rando, right? Well, I would say that I'm
I
always
like
the
that
rando,
about
but half the time I'm following you and pieces that I'm still trying to catch up on the reading that you've kind of thrown over the fence at me. This time, though, I found Scott Galloway's Post Corona. So I'm kind of looking at it from a business
you.
and
Is that on was it No Mercy No Malice this week?
I didn't see it on the podcast. I just saw it as one of the books that I had on my list. I keep a list of books. They don't get, I'm a nerd. I keep a list of books that I specifically have friends that I reach out to, you being one of those, that I just kind of keep on my list of next to read. So, yeah, I'm kind of diving into a little of Galloway's Post Corona and finding really interesting implications for the way business works and where business will be going. I threw a question about that from LinkedIn, kind of going, what kind of changes did we make that we're conscious of? So I've been thinking a lot about that. We made a lot of changes, and when we went into this pandemic environment, right, of virtual everything, Galloway's premises it's accelerated a lot. But I want to go
I would
back
agree
and
with that.
go, yeah. Well, and I want to go back and go, what are those things that we changed without even realizing it? And let's take a moment and be conscious about those things that have changed and that we're working on doing now.
Oh, that's
So,
interesting because so I mean, you and I have been remote or mostly remote for way longer than the pandemic. So I kind of
yeah,
stayed away from the pontification on this question. I didn't feel like I was adequately qualified. I feel like I was cheating because I wanted to be more remote prior to working at ServiceNow, and then I became full remote, like working here, even though the office is just like
even
40 minutes away, and I
right,
never
even
would go in.
before this happened.
Right, and I loved that option. I could come into the office whenever I wanted to, and I would bring cookies and coffee, and everybody would come and say like, "Oh, check out Ben's baked goods." So like I
Yeah,
would only come into the office if I had a way to make everybody smile, and I was like always really strategic about that. Just so I like the flex option, and I would come in whenever I wanted to, which was the key, right? Otherwise, I was working at home, and if I felt lonely and or that I wanted to share baked goods with all of the training coordinators and admins who manage my schedule. Just pro
right.
tip to all you out there, if you work with anybody that schedules you, make sure that you keep them super happy. If anybody controls
And
your schedule, doesn't matter who they are in the organization, make sure that you know what they like, how they take their coffee. Doesn't matter if they're a temp or like contingent or whatever. Make sure that you understand how they take their coffee or their tea and what big goods they like, and you will always be a happy person. Just that's
chocolate is handy. Mine used to be to bring Trow, the chocolatier in
yep,
San Diego office.
yep,
But yeah, it just got me thinking, what other things were habits and things that we picked up in this environment beyond? Because just like you, I feel kind of like cheating because I did virtual for most of
right.
my, but what other things did we pick up and change that we now are at that point where we're not even conscious that we're doing it. But maybe if we were, we'd do it a little better, or we'd do it a little more, or we'd do it a little. For me, it's that idea, like, it's one thing to be remote, it's another thing to be forced remote. And when forced
Feel like you
remote
didn't get to
suddenly,
choose it, right? Yeah,
yeah,
no.
you learn to manage your rest time a lot more diligently. I used to kind of just squeak it in whenever, and I was kind of conscious of it. But now I've become like, really, it becomes a thing where you have to learn even more tricks when there is no office to go back to for a period. Or and I'm like, that's a skill that I don't want to lose as we go back to the office. That deliberate practice of recognizing when I need to change gears, look at different work to do, or step away, or those are things that I became very conscious of during that time. But I don't want to lose that skill as we get back into officing, maybe, or back into free officing, or temporary, or any of those kinds of things. So I'm real curious to see what everybody else is thinking about. I'm thinking about that kind of stuff a lot.
So I'm gonna wrap that, and I think that those are really good points. I'm thinking we are, yeah, I would say that that one really hits close to home, and I want to think about it a little bit more and come back to that one too. Because again, I have avoided that particular topic because I felt like, oh well, I can't really speak to it because I was already doing it. But honestly, like you're right. I think the idea that if we were forced to do it is very different than if we leaned into it, because I think I was starting to lean into some of the home stuff because I wanted to be home more, like for my son full time, rather than be
Right.
traveling a lot or in the office as he was getting older. And then Corona hit, and it was like, well, I was already moving in that direction, and so I jokingly quintupled down on the home office. So like I got like the crest of that wave because I went and looked at pictures of my studio and shots of my classes from 2019, 2020, 2021, and it was that 2020, 2021 window where things just went bonkers here. Like there were certain
Dude,
elements
I have some of those pictures of you and I doing exactly this from like
right,
2019. And you've
right,
you've got something like, you've got a poster behind you, and that's about it.
right.
So things, yeah.
So there were little things, and then we kind of were like, oh, I think everybody's doing this. And so we caught like the early wave, and then it just went bananas. Um, and then and then it felt like we were extra smart, like somehow, even though I know I'm not like extra smart. It just like happened to be pretty lucky and at the right time where I felt like, oh, you know what, like this investment that might have seemed crazy last year or indulgent last year has paid dividends in that like I've had, these particular metrics like all go up because I just happen to hit the window.
Hmm.
But I do want to kind of look at that from a perspective of, well, like you said, like with Galloway's thing, like we know that there's a factor of 10 with the acceleration. Like a lot of these trends were already happening. I was justifying some of my home studio purchases prior to the pandemic because I knew that these things were happening. And I was thinking that it might happen in 5 years. Like I might be at the point I'm at now in 5 years with
Yep.
the studio setup. But like it just made sense because of pandemic. But now that we're post pandemic, does it still make sense for somebody to try to get to this level of either home automation in terms of like their homework setup, or should they be even thinking about some of these like little tiny edges or optimizations? Oh, I like this topic. Okay. So I want to jump in the last couple minutes, and put a kind of fine bow on stuff that people can do for extra credit this week, to move us into some of the stuff that I want to talk about for next week. So if you want to be teacher pet slash somebody that's already done their homework, and or a little bit extra, here's some of the things that I'm hoping you will take up and or check out. Um, I think that there are a couple of really excellent little things you can learn and read about. Specifically, I wanted to point out data models because we were talking about sort of the ServiceNow data model. I want to give a shout out to one of my favorite data nerds of all time, Mr. Edward Tufte. The every time you use a PowerPoint, God kills a kitten meme source. Not that he would ever kill a kitten, but this is a book that came out. Let's see, it was published 2020, and then came out like I think I got my autograph copy 2021. It is incredible. Um, it is called Seeing with Fresh Eyes, Meaning, Space, Data, and Truth. It is quite possibly one of his best works. Obviously, I think all of his stuff is pretty great. The reason I like to put it here from an academic perspective is it's totally outside of the standard, like, oh, Ben's going to try and help you pass the CSA exam, whatever. Why do I think it's important? I think that this gives me, or gives you, perspective if you are an aspiring power admin, power developer. You're eventually, if you want to move into the certified technical architect program, this is the kind of reading you should be doing, because this is where we get into not just how does ServiceNow's data model affect users, how do we think about data in general, and how do you see it every time with fresh eyes? How do you see it from different perspectives? How has it been seen in the past? How have people made use of this data in the past? And one of the things that I'm always trying to do is go, okay, yes, I know I work at ServiceNow. ServiceNow is a great platform. ServiceNow has taught me a lot and given me the opportunity to see things from different perspectives than I had in my previous existence, mostly because I've had the opportunity to work with such a vast number of clients, right? I've worked and seen everything under the sun at this point now. Not everything under the sun, but I've seen so much more than I had seen in my previous life. And I know, Sean, you've seen even more than I have at this point, being able to work with all kinds of clients, and seeing how people's business pain is all the same and yet different. And what I love about this particular book is that it gave me just it got me excited, and I feel like anytime you get an opportunity to see this man speak, you should go. It's like a 1-day seminar if you ever see it. I'm actually going to see. Oh, I don't think he's got any. Dang it, he's got the online course. He's getting pretty old, unfortunately. Um, if he ever does another like live event, you should try and find a way to go. It is like the Coachella of data nerd events. You will walk out wanting to make reports in ServiceNow. Like you'll walk out and want to just like start playing around with performance analytics. You'll want to walk out and go like, how can I take data from my organization and do good stuff with it? Like that's the kind of jam that Edward Tufte. That's the Edward Tufte energy that he brings. So
I'm gonna add that to my list, and then as soon as I finish the next one,
we
the
did
list
it.
will
All
be
right,
finished
everybody. We
shorter.
convinced Sean. We convinced Sean.
I'm
We did
in.
it. All right, sweet. So you got anything for us for extra credit, sir, before we, we wrap up?
Just like I said, if you've got something to add, something that you learned that you didn't realize from the pandemic that you want to think about, keep in mind, or remind the rest of us, go check out my LinkedIn post and throw it in that thread, because I'd love to get a bunch of people with ideas and bits and pieces that they learned. Or check out the Scott Galloway book, Post Corona.
Oh yeah, throw it in. We'll throw it in the
I
show
did.
notes. Oh,
It's when you hear me tapping, just so anyone else knows, I'm busily trying to catch up on notes as Ben's talking. So I'm trying to get down his links. Everett Thompson, thank you for yours. Isela, thank you for yours as well. I'm throwing those all in our show notes that we'll have out there.
guys, it's been a pleasure. I love doing this every week. And you know what? It's been a blast this week, as always. So next week, make sure you guys get your questions into us. I'm going to be pouring through a couple more from the parking lots. I'm actually going to be mid. Ooh, if I look at my schedule here.
Yeah, you and I both, right? I'll be mid application development class.
Ooh, I'll be mid ServiceNow platform implementation.
So we're gonna be all over it.
Good. It's gonna be great. So I'm thinking to myself, this week, if we think about it, I'm like, cool. So I'll be coming in hot on a Tuesday right after class. I'm sure you'll be coming in hot on a Tuesday right
Same.
after class. So we'll have parking lot items, I'm sure. But if those of you guys listening to the show after the fact, remember, just hit us up, ben.forrest at ServiceNow or sean.mclean. That's MCC. There's two C's, right?
Yep, like Mr. Clean, but with C's.
Oh, I like that.
McLean of the Clan McLean.
So we looking forward to maybe answering some more questions from you this week. Glad we could hammer out a couple. For those of you guys who are, one last extra credit. And this is just like a do good things kind of thing. The new Welcome to ServiceNow course is out. if there's somebody that you think in your
Okay.
organization that would benefit from, here's what I would do if I were you guys. I would check out the course, and if you're looking to get good at explaining ServiceNow to other people, look at the course and then try to
Use
teach
that.
content from the course to somebody that is interested in it or in your organization. If you're trying to build up momentum, if you're trying to help explain other people, see if you can explain what's in that course. Do a little practice exercise where you take it and then see if you can explain what's in it before you even send it to somebody else. So like that would be my other extra credit. So Edward Tufte's Seeing with Fresh Eyes, and then also the Welcome to ServiceNow class, which just released. Um, Selfishly, I will be in the promo. We filmed a little ad spot for that where I get to be the completely clueless guy that walks in on the first day. And there's a printer on fire and other stuff that's happening, where I have to try and fake my way through the day. But thankfully, the course objectives help me at least, kind of. It was like my little pool floaties was that course. So
That's perfect. I can't wait to see that. You've been talking about filming it, so I'm psyched to see the outputs.
good times. All right,
Well, and
guys.
hopefully too, we'll follow up next week. Maybe we'll have a guest. He says again with that long eyebrow,
Oh,
and hoping we'll be able to pull that off.
yep. All right, guys. Thanks again so much for being with us, and we will catch y'all next week. Take care, y'all.
See ya.